as we continue today to respond to the tragedy on Monday night, February 13th, 2023, at Michigan State University, where a gunman opened fire at both Berkey Hall and the MSU Union building and then fled on campus and around the East Lansing area, ultimately taking his own life in the face of law enforcement late into the evening. At this time, it currently stands 3 are dead from on-site at Michigan State, and 5 are in the hospital at this moment in Sparrow Health System in the Lansing area. Joining us now is Debbie Binder, who serves during the day as the West Bloomfield Township Clerk, but day, night, and everything in between, she is a parent, and a parent of an MSU student as well. Debbie, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you joining us, too, at what I can only assume is an extremely tough time for you and for other parents in the Michigan State community. Your son, Matt, is currently an MSU student. He was on campus last night as the events unfolded. Take us through your initial conversations with your son during this tragedy and your initial reactions as a concerned parent, as a mother, knowing that your son was there and there was a whole lot of uncertainty in East Lansing.
I was very fortunate, Tyler, in that I was one of the lucky parents who got a call from him right away. I didn't know about what was going on until he called. He called about 8:50 and he said, "Mom, I'm okay." And I said, "What do you mean you're okay?" And he said, "Are you watching?" And I was at dinner, so I hadn't been. And he filled me in briefly as much as he could, told me he was in lockdown in the lower level of the STEM building. We didn't know all the circumstances because obviously he couldn't talk for very long. He, said, I'll keep you posted. And then he sent another text a little bit later that he was okay and said, he said, "I can text, but I can't talk." But then the news was saying, don't text, don't call your kid. And as you're hearing that the suspect is on the loose, you don't know if they're in their school building. I mean, you don't know where that suspect is. So all of a sudden you're thinking, well, if I call him and I make his phone ring, or I text him and I make his phone ring, I better not call or text. So there was about an hour and a half where we had no communication, just hoping that he was still okay. His dad was able to track on his, find my device that he was in the same location, but you do worry. And then at the beginning, I wasn't as worried because I knew he was safe, but as time went on and the suspect was on the loose and I wasn't getting a text from him. And then you start thinking, well, I hope that his phone doesn't die. I hope it has enough charge that we can track him and he can contact us. So it was a very long evening of waiting and uncertainty. I do think the university, the deputy chief there did a really nice job keeping us informed. But again, Tyler, I recognize how lucky I was to have the information I had as a parent, because I know in watching there were parents whose kids had to run out without their cell phones, and the victims of the violence and the kids who were hurt. So I do recognize that I dealt with all the uncertainty and the concern of parenting, but I was lucky as it went for a lot of the other parents and what they were dealing with.
As you talked with your son, Matt, throughout the evening and in between periods of sheltering and learning more information as the situation developed in East Lansing, take us through a little bit of his experience from what he had mentioned to you, and as a student from his perspective, how harrowing that was and how he helped others in his immediate surroundings, and they helped him in the wake of that tragedy on campus.
He said he was in the room with about 60 kids, 60 other students, and they really relied on each other. He did say at no time did he feel unsafe, which made him feel a little bit better in the overall picture. But they did say when the police came, it took a while for them to let them in because they didn't trust that it was the police outside the door. So they did rely on each other. They did, it was about 4 hours that he was in lockdown in that basement. So it was a significant period of time. My conversations with him this morning were, his processing it very well. He understands the gravity. He understands the concern. He feels terrible for the victims. He understands they were his classmates and his friends. But he did say from where he was in the basement, he did feel like he was in a secure environment and they were able to use the training that had been in place. We do a lot of training for the uncertain, and you hope when it happens that you're ready and that training comes into play. And it sounds like that training really came into play. They got the text message right away, so they knew to go into lockdown. They were trained to barricade the doors. They implemented all of the things they had been trained over time. And it's certainly heartbreaking that these are the times we have to live in, where we worry that every time we take our child to school or our child goes to school, that something can happen. But they really did seem to take their training and put it into play. And that's what he described to me from being in that classroom, also in the basement level, that they all, worked together, understood the importance of protecting the room, protecting the space. And they did it, and they waited it out until the police did come to release them. And like I said, they didn't believe that they were the police right away. It took them time to let them in. So I can imagine that as he processes it more, he'll take in more details. But the conversation so far is that he's processing it, as well as can be expected as somebody who's gone through this kind of a tragedy so close to home.
We're joined on today's program by Debbie Binder from West Bloomfield Township. She is a parent of an MSU student and also serves as the West Bloomfield Township Clerk. And in your situation, we certainly feel very fortunate for you in this case that your son was safe throughout and you were able to have that communication with him, and that you are assured now that he is safe where he is at on MSU's campus. But from a parent's perspective, thinking about other parents that may not have been in as fortunate of a situation as you were during that or in the wake of that, put yourself in that perspective, Debbie, and just give us some thoughts as a parent and as someone that's very empathetic as you are, how you feel for those other parents in the MSU community that are going through what can only be imagined as a variety of different emotions at this time.
I can't even imagine the stress and the anxiety of that uncertainty. I mean, again, I knew right away, but as a parent, and your heart goes out to, excuse me, any parent, excuse me, who is in that, that waiting game. You're waiting. Even the hour and a half I was waiting to hear from him the second time, having known that he was okay before, all the things that go through your mind, and you conjure up every possible scenario, and it's easy to work yourself into a frenzy. So I can't even imagine how these parents that didn't hear from their kids, or whose kids, they were interviewing some of the students who had to run out of the classrooms or run out of a building, leaving their phone and their personal belongings behind with no way to contact a parent right away. And I just, my heart goes out to them. It goes out to that whole community. The Spartan community will be shaken, but they will also, prevail, because that's what Spartans do. But my heart just goes out to every parent who was affected, because being fortunate, I was still so unsettled and uncertain and scared that I can't even imagine the parents who didn't have that contact or even have momentary knowledge that their child was okay. It's a very, very concerning, stressful moment, and you don't have control over the situation, and what you want to do is incongruous with what they're guiding you to do, and you also understand why it's incongruous, because you know that having that phone call may actually create a problem, that you're putting an alert on your child's phone, yet all you want to do is know that your child is safe. So my heart goes out to every parent that is still waiting for answers, and was waiting for answers. Last night it was a long night, and I'm glad that for me it had a good outcome, and my heart breaks for those who may or may not know yet that the outcome wasn't so good, or the kids. I think that a lot of the kids, the emotional toll that it's going to take on a lot of these kids who lived it, and they're interviewing students who were involved in the Oxford shooting, and now they're involved in the Michigan State shooting, and this is just not what any of us hope that our kids grow up in. And from all of the perspectives, it's a lot to process and a lot to digest. And I think we'll all be doing that over the next few weeks. And I think my son will be too. And I imagine when he reconnects with those kids, after last night, it'll be an important reunion, and possibly an important conversation that they have. But I really do think that community came together to support those kids, and that's how my son felt last night. He really did feel like the community was there for them. what really did, I will say one thing, Tyler, I think is important that troubled him as a student. He knew the amount of misinformation that was going around. He had told me early on he heard something about the union, but when I was filling him in later on, when he was able to text again and knew he was more secure, he said he was hearing these reports about explosives and about other things, and he knew that it didn't make sense based on the space. But it's concerning that these kids who are trying to navigate a crisis situation like they were, make the best decisions they can given that crisis situation, are trying to discern what's good information and what's misinformation. So I know that misinformation again will become important in the follow-up on this and making sure that the kids know the correct places to get that information. And I think to a degree they did, but they were still hearing all of the information being shared that they knew or thought possibly was inaccurate. So I think the important lesson, that I'm taking away is I'm going to hug them a little bit tighter. It was a long, 4 hours of parenting. Um, and my heart goes out to the whole community and everybody else who's digesting what we're all waking up to this morning.
Debbie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler.